Literally, yes, it's time and place. Why is it important for us to identify the time and place in which a text, a novel, the events of a novel or a play take place, or a poem take place? Why
Good
do we
morning.
need to identify the setting? Yes?
Maybe it helps to know the theme of the story or the play or whatever was the genre of the text.
Genre, not necessarily, but the theme, yes, the way the setting is depicted might help us identify the general idea of a text. Yes, to a certain extent. That's true. Mhm.
It also
Ah,
makes it easier for the reader to imagine the scene.
yes. It
To get a better
makes it
idea,
easy for us to imagine a scene. Yes.
to get a better idea about the circumstance of the events.
Good. Circumstances is a key word here. Circumstances. Any other word? Circumstances. The circumstances in which the characters live, let's say. Because if you say circumstances, you refer also to characters. Any other word, any more technical expression?
It makes us feel the atmosphere.
Yes, but you're anticipating here. Setting. Setting circumstances or setting. Setting puts the reader in a particular. It is the word we need here.
Mood.
Mood, yes, but yeah, again, you're anticipating. Atmosphere and mood. We'll be dealing with atmosphere and mood later. But
Image,
setting
maybe.
means something related to
Image, maybe.
circumstances. Sorry? If you read the text, for instance, events are set in the year, let's say, 1940. Is it the same context as our present context?
No, no.
In what sense? So what does it, how does it help you? How does your knowledge of the setting help you? Or how does it affect you as a reader?
It helps us read the characters,
Understand
their
how the
exact location,
location.
what time of the day, for example, night and day.
Yes, this is what we call the specific setting, the time of day. Yes,
Yeah.
morning, evening,
Yes.
noon, afternoon, night. Yes, and all these specific times, specific points in time, moments, have a particular significance, or they are associated
Yes.
with particular feelings. Yes, this is as far as the specific setting is concerned.
Miss, through
Yes,
the setting, we can visualize and experience the story better. You see.
yes, good. It optimizes, if you want, our experience of the story. Yes, it puts us in a specific mood. Mhm. It also determines our expectations about the story. So when you read a story set in the previous century, it's different from reading a story set in the present. Each
Yes, there is difference.
Yeah, each era has its specificities, has its features, characteristics. Each era, each time is associated with particular events. So to read a text set in the 1940s, as I said, already invokes a particular, what do you call this? A particular
Historical event.
historical a whole
Background.
background or context. Good. So a whole historical background. So setting helps us know about or discover the background of the historical background, the social background of the characters, just as it helps us identify the historical context of the whole story. And thus, what does it do? It predetermines our expectations from the story. We know from the beginning that we are reading a historical novel, let's say, for instance, that we are reading historical events that might have a reference in the real world. We are reading the story of some historical figures, people we can identify or in reality, or people we know, for instance. It's different from reading a fairy tale, let's say. So setting always predetermines our expectations from the story. Yes, did you want to say something? Setting, yeah. Is that all about setting? You talked about atmosphere now and mood. What do you mean by atmosphere? Let's try to define atmosphere.
The mood of the character or the mood of the story in general?
The general mood of the story.
For
The
example,
feeling reading the story.
The general idea.
calmliness or epic or I don't know.
Here, your epic maybe applies to tone. We are discussing tone. That's different.
Maybe the emotions evoked in the story,
Sorry, could you repeat?
like the emotions evoked in the story.
Good. The emotions evoked by a particular
feeling-
setting. Evoked
The feeling while reading.
the feelings evoked in whose mind? To whom does the atmosphere belong?
The readers.
The hero or the reader?
The reader, mainly the reader. So setting atmosphere relates to how or to the sensations, the emotions, the impressions, the reactions that the setting creates or evokes in the reader's mind. This is why it's different from mood. Mood is the emotion. Sorry.
The mood is the feelings of the character itself.
Yes, mood relates more to the character. The
In
emotions,
accordance with the settings.
yes, the emotions, reactions, impressions, feelings that the setting and atmosphere create or invoke in the character's mind. So when we refer to atmosphere, we are discussing the relationship between the setting and the reader. The way the reader reacts to the setting. When we discuss mood, here we are trying to identify the relationship between or
The relationship
how.
between the character and the reader?
Now, between setting, atmosphere, and character. Is it clear?
Can you repeat, please?
Okay. Atmosphere. With atmosphere, we move outward. We are outside the story, or we try to identify a relationship between the story and the reader, if you want. But with mood, we are inside the story, inside the fictional universe of the novel, the text, or the story, or the poem, or the play, okay? Because we are discussing the impact of the setting and the atmosphere on the character's psyche, on the character's psychology, on the character's state of mind. So we are inside the fictional universe of the story. What is the feeling of the character? Yes, or the impressions, the reactions, the sensations evoked by the character or felt by the character, expressed by the character towards a particular setting, towards the whole context in which that character is placed. Let's not forget that characters are, to a certain extent, products of their own circumstances, products of their own setting. Characters born in a particular setting are different from characters born in a different setting. Characters' personalities differ according to the circumstance in which they are placed, according to the settings in which they are created or placed. Is there a question before we explore the definitions? It's the other, Amanullah, is the other way around. Okay? Mood relates to character, atmosphere relates to setting. Mood relates to character. With mood, we are inside the story, the fictional universe of the story or the novel. We're exploring the impact of the setting on the character, on the character's psychology. How the setting affects the character. This is mood. With atmosphere, we're exploring the impact of the setting on the reader. This is why for atmosphere, for instance, we say this is a depressing atmosphere. This is your impression. To me, as a reader, this atmosphere is depressing, okay? But when you describe the character who is affected by this setting and atmosphere, you would say the character is depressed. You would use the EG form, the past participle, because he is a victim of that setting. The setting or the atmosphere act upon that character. Okay, let's explore the definition of setting. This is the formal definition. By the way, when we explore these concepts, we'll come across many definitions that you might need to memorize, okay? Because in the exam, you'll be asked to define some concepts or to compare and contrast some concepts. So there is a theoretical part in the exam where you need to define and compare, contrast different concepts. So when we come across a definition, try to memorize it, try to understand it. You can, of course, define it using your own words in the exam, but the language you use should be, should be academic, formal, and you should use the jargon that we learn, okay, in this throughout these sessions. So the term setting refers to the general locale. This is a French word, but it has this meaning in English. It's a technical term and it has this meaning, a place. It doesn't simply mean location, place. It means a place where something happens or is set, or that has particular events associated with it. So it means a place with which some events are, or some experience in the life of a character is associated. So this is the meaning of locale, place and events associated with it. Historical time and social circumstances in which the action of a fictional or dramatic work occurs. Historical time and social circumstances. How would you understand historical time? This refers to the general setting. Historical time. This could be a reference to a year.
Century.
A particular time in history.
Year
century.
before, years, centuries.
Good, yes.
Months.
Months. Months, years, good. Particular events, historical events.
Days, hours.
Season.
Historical time, with historical time, not necessarily, okay? Hours or with specific time, yes. But historical time, it might be a whole year, a whole era, the Victorian era, for instance, a whole decade, a world war, so on and so forth. Social
Century.
The whole century, yes. The Victorian era covers a whole century, for instance, yes. The social circumstances. So
Miss, the social circumstances related to the
In which
years
character
before.
Sorry, could you repeat?
No.
I want to see your see them.
Social
Yes.
circumstances, for example, in the society in 1991, it's not the same in the 21st century, for example. In the
Yes.
21st century, for example, 2019, it's not the same.
Very good. Yes. So here we're
Or in
discussing.
1912, there's the World War I.
Yes. So here we're discussing the social circumstances.
It's all related to the actions, to the
Discuss social circumstances,
can change
society,
the action.
individuals, society, whole societies. So this means that we're discussing also, we're implicitly discussing the impact of a particular time in history, particular events that happened at that time, and the way they impact the life of individuals. It could also be a recent time in history. It could be recent history. If you take, you said 2019, the year 2019. You take, I give you a setting, a very, let's say, a quite revealing setting. Let's take the year 2019, the month December 2019 in China, for instance.
Yeah, the COVID.
Yes. So if you take China a few months before, you would have very different circumstances, social circumstances. But if you take that particular date, that particular time, that particular month, it's quite revealing with regard to people's circumstances, social circumstances, political circumstances, people's health conditions are changing. So life is changing. It is different. It's quite different. So see how time might affect social circumstances. It's quite revealing with regard to social circumstances. So it's not historical time, it's very recent. But the events or the setting that you choose reveals a lot about the circumstances of a particular society. The setting of an episode or scene within a work is a particular physical location in which it takes place. Here we're moving on to the specific setting. The setting is usually established through description, but narration and dialogue also reveal the location and time. So it's revealed through description.
Miss, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Miss, is the social circumstances not always related to time, to the past time, or I don't know, in the past?
No, not necessarily. Yes.
It could be at the moment, but I don't know. For example, it's not the same person that has been raised in a poor family, or a person is raised in a rich family.
Good. Yeah, this is what I'm saying. So the setting always affects the individual's personality. It reveals a lot about the person's background.
Yes.
It affects a lot the person's psychology. Yes. To a great extent.
Yes.
Yes. So we're discussing
okay.
time, but we're also discussing people's lives, individual lives, social circumstance, societies, how societies live at a particular time in history or in the present. Yes.
It could be family too.
Yes, individuals, whole families, whole societies, or just one family. Yes, of course, sure. The setting is usually established through description, so I said narration, but also narration and dialogue. Time now. So clock time, we have 4 kinds of time: clock time, calendar time, seasonal time, historical time. Clock time, this is very specific. It can be used to provide suspense or create certain moods or feelings. So clock time, midday is different from midnight. 8 in the morning, it's associated with a particular activity. If you take 8 in the morning, then you would be referring to a time where people are most active, or for some people. For some others, it's people are still probably inactive, sleeping. People are studying at 8, so it's associated with different activities. Or if you take midnight, it creates suspense, it creates a certain atmosphere of darkness, obscurity, so we can expect some imminent danger. It can be the time of a murder. Okay, so different events, different circumstances. Calendar time, the day, month, year, or more generally a day of the week or time of the month, and these may provide an understanding of what takes place in a piece of literature.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, we're reading the notes and trying to interpret them. So clock time, calendar time, the day, month, year, or more generally a day of the week or time of the month. These references may provide an understanding of what takes place in a piece of literature. Do you have any examples? Any other examples?
Centuries time.
I'm sorry.
Decades.
Some holidays, miss.
But
yes, good. Yeah. Here we're referring to particular days of the year. This is calendar time. Holidays, yes, especially religious festivities. They have particular associations.
Christmas.
Associations, yes.
For example, Christmas, something like that.
Yes. Particular days. You said Christmas.
National holidays.
Yes. The national holidays. Yes.
Thanksgiving.
Yes. Some have some
World War One.
The season.
Yes.
The seasons.
Yes, the different seasons. Last time we saw autumn and how it affects the speaker's mood in poetry. Month,
summer.
year, yeah, or a day of the week. Some days associated with rest. It also has a religious connotation for some religions in Christianity. Friday has a religious connotation for us. It's associated with a particular activity, religious activity. So you see that these particular settings have a particular significance, but this depends on the culture, depends on the characters depicted in the work. Seasonal time, the seasons are a span of time associated with a particular activity, change, transformation. Historical time, this can establish a psychological or sociological understanding of behaviors and attitudes at a given moment in history. So this is why historical time and the historical context are important. They can establish a psychological or sociological understanding of behaviors and attitudes at a given moment in history. People living in Victorian times have a particular mindset, lifestyle, different attitudes. Their attitudes are different from ours. Place now may find significance in the actual location where the action occurs, but we need to pay attention to the non-physical as well as the physical environment.
Miss, sometimes in a novel, or I don't know where he doesn't describe, we don't know the place, but he describes it with lightning lights. Lights help us understand that we're in night, something like that.
Yes, good. References to time and place may be implicit, if you want, indirect, not explicit.
Yes.
Yes,
yes.
Good. And here we try to decipher, we try to understand or to find clues or hints at the time and place where the events take place. Yes, this is what we mean by non-physical. So we need to pay attention to the physical aspects of the setting as well as the non-physical aspects of the setting. The idea of setting, so here, includes the physical, concrete, tangible environment of the story. So the author might describe a house, a street, a city, a landscape, a region. A house, a street, a city, this is what we call, what kind of setting do we have here? If the author describes a city, a street, because there are different kinds of setting. There is a historical, yeah, and physical, yes, but all these are
downtown.
Yes, downtown. What does this mean? You need an adjective.
A big city. A big city.
It's a big
Specific.
It's an adjective. An adjective. I need an adjective that sums up this idea. One word.
Specific places.
Crowded.
Yes. It's what we call an urban setting. It's an urban setting. Urban setting. I wrote this in the chat box. A landscape, a region, a forest. This is what we call a
Rural.
Very good. Rural setting. Or agrarian setting. Rural agrarian setting. Any other word? If we have a setting, a natural setting.
This, what does it mean, rural agrarian?
Okay. That's right.
It's the same as urban?
No, it's rather the opposite. So I said the idea of setting includes the physical environment of a story, a house, a street, a city. We said these references might establish what we call, or might refer to a rural, what we call, an urban setting, but a landscape, a region, a natural setting, the reference to trees, to animals, to birds.
Okay.
Here we're referring to what we call a rural or agrarian setting. So it's the countryside, okay?
Yes, yes. City and countryside, okay.
Yes, so it's not the city, so it's the adjective from countryside if you want.
Yes, yes.
The non-physical now environment includes cultural influences such as education, social standing, economic class, and religious belief. Notice that these refer to individuals more than a particular place. Okay, so here we're exploring the way the setting reveals the culture background of its inhabitants, of the characters, their beliefs, their understanding, their lifestyle, their mindsets. So this is what we mean by the non-physical environment. So in setting, we're not simply exploring place and time. See, we're exploring the characteristics of a particular place, the characteristics and features of a particular time, and the characteristics or features of the inhabitants of that setting. The society to which that setting relates, the whole culture. Because when we say social standing, education, economic class, religious belief, we're exploring the cultural aspect of that setting and its inhabitants. These may be revealed by physical properties in the scene or through the characters' dialogue, thoughts, statements, and behaviors. So these can be revealed by some tangible aspects of the setting, the explicit description of features of the setting, of the house, the street, the city, the landscape, or the region, or these may be revealed through characterization. I'll discuss characterization next time, okay? Through the characters' dialogues, thoughts, statements, and behaviors. But here, be careful. We're not interested in how the characters look or behave as much as we are interested in how these characters represent a whole society living in that particular setting. That is how people lived at that time. We are referring to a historical time. Clear?
Yes.
Here we have an example. Let's explore this extract from Elizabeth Gaskell's The Moorland Cottage. This novel was published in 1851. So this takes place, it should take place, I mean, in the Victorian era. Elizabeth Gaskell is a Victorian writer. So here we can, we see how through the description of this setting and the characters, we can explore the era, the whole era. We have a glimpse. We can have a glimpse at how people behaved at that time, their way of thinking, their lifestyles. If you take the turn to the left, after you pass the gate at Combehurst Church, you will come to the wooden bridge over the brook. And in half a mile or so, you will be in a breezy upland field, where sheep pasture on the short, fine, elastic turf. You look down on Combehurst and its beautiful church spire. The swelling waves of the upland make a near horizon against the sky. The lark quivers and sings high up in the air, too high, in too desert a region for you to see her. Now she falls suddenly right into her nest, hidden among the ling, unseen except by the eyes of heaven. With something like the sudden drop of the lark, the path goes down a green abrupt descent. Surrounded by the grassy hills, there stands the dwelling, which is neither cottage nor house, but something between the two in size. It is the dwelling of Mrs. Brown, the widow of the late curate of Combehurst. There she lived with her faithful old servant and her only children, a boy and girl. They were as secluded in their green hollow as the households in the German forest tales. Once a week they emerged and crossed the common, catching on its summit the first sounds of the sweet-toned bells, calling them to church. Let's identify the setting.
We start with the place.
Yes?
The lake gate
It's a rural
at
setting.
Combehurst.
It's a rural setting. Mm-hmm. You said it's the gate at Combehurst Church. Could you repeat?
The bridge.
A bridge.
A file. Upland file, I guess.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
The Victorian era.
It's an upland file.
Yes, the dwelling, Manar, the dwelling of Mrs. Brown. Mm-hmm. You said the gate at Combehurst Church, the dwelling of Mrs. Brown. These are specific references, but what about the general setting?
The Victorian era.
before, yes, I'm not referring to the historical context, okay? But you said, your friend said, let's start with place. Yes, the place. And he started describing, he said, Converse Church or the gate. But these are specific references, details. What is it? What is this place? It's the church and its surrounding field. There's a field that surrounds the church. There is a church, there is a field, and there is Mrs. Brown's dwelling. So the text describes the field. So the text describes the church, the architecture of the church, the gate, the field, and Mrs. Brown's dwelling. Here. One of the friends said it's a rural setting. It is a rural setting. It's a natural setting. Can you, that's true. Can you find or justify your answer?
Region.
Sorry?
There is field, there is sheep.
Yes, a breezy upland field where sheep pasture on the short, fine elastic turf. Turf means a grassy piece of land. So, a field, sheep, turf.
Grassy hills.
Yes, grassy hills, the upland, the sky, the lark. The lark is a bird. The lark is singing high up in the air.
Region.
Bridging with
Hills.
the hills, the grassy hills. And even the reference to Mrs. Brown's, yes, Emna, the reference to Mrs. Brown's dwelling. It's compared to, it's neither cottage nor house. So it's something between the two in size. But the use of the word cottage, you know that a cottage is a
In the countryside.
house. Yes, a small house in the countryside.
In the woods.
Sorry?
In the woods.
Yes, in the woods. Not necessarily. But I see your point. There is, they were as secluded, we are told, towards the end of the text, they were as secluded in their green hollow as the households in the German forest tales. So German forest tales invokes a Gothic setting, if you want. Forest tales, horror tales.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I see your point. We'll explore this. This has another meaning. Okay, we'll explore this later. So it's a rural
It's a comparison,
setting.
miss. It's a comparison.
Yes, we'll analyze this in a minute, okay? But let's comment on place now.
Okay.
How else can you depict this setting? What else can we say about it? It's a rural setting, but how is nature depicted?
Can you repeat the question?
How is nature depicted here? Dazzling, high up in the air, the eyes of heaven. How does the author feel about this set? Beautiful church spire. See how the author describes the church, the upland, a breezy upland.
He describes.
Breezy.
He describes the. He's making a comparison between life in the forest and in the countryside and in the city, but without mentioning the city. He's describing the place. He loves it, adores it, or something.
Yeah, the description is very appreciative. There is appreciation. Yes.
The author is fascinated by the nature.
There is fascination. Yes. Metaphorical description. Yes. Yeah,
The scenery.
It's a scenery. It's a beautiful landscape. Good. So the description is highly appreciative. Let me write it. So we have a highly appreciative depiction of the scenery. Metaphorical, positive, yes. It's a colorful word, charming,
Majestic.
good, very good. But and another word for majestic, especially when the author says things high up in the sky, the eyes of heaven. Nature is elevated here. Divine, marvelous. Nature is in one word.
Heaven.
Heavenly,
Heavenly.
heavenly, yes. Divine, sublime.
Place in the world.
Nature is glorified, elevated. Satisfying, yes, to the senses.
Peaceful.
Peaceful, yes. Now, what kind of atmosphere does this, let's say, romantic setting, you can also say romantic. Here, romantic, mind you, does not refer to romance. It's not a reference to romance when you say
It means
romantic.
a good mood, a good feeling of joy, happiness, freedom.
In the presence of nature.
Yes.
It's all related to nature. Good, yeah. So it has nothing to do with romance, with love and romance. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Romantic is a reference to the movement, romanticism. Yes, that feeling of comfort, serenity that we derive from our contact with nature, the harmony, this harmony with nature. Serenity, good. In the presence of nature and all the natural elements. And we feel this harmony among the natural elements, the reference to the bird, the reference to the grass. Even the church seems to be part of that, even if it's a building. It's man-made, but still it is part of that setting. There is harmony. You look down on Converse and it's beautiful church spire. You know, the church spire is that part, that high part, that architecture of the church, like the architecture of the mosque for us. Okay, that high part of the building. There is spirituality, yes. There is spirituality.
Creative design.
Yes. Now, let's discuss the atmosphere. Tantalizing, yes.
A good atmosphere. A good atmosphere.
Good is too general, too broad.
Peaceful atmosphere.
Yes, good. Peaceful atmosphere. This romantic setting, this rural setting creates a peaceful atmosphere. Comforting.
Comfort, yeah.
Yes. Cozy, calm. A great deal of tranquility. Enjoyable. Tranquility.
Breathtaking.
Peace. Yes. Breathtaking.
Delightful.
Delightful.
Emotional.
Sorry. Emotional, the tone. This could describe the tone used by the author.
Lovable.
Yes. But as I said, romantic has nothing to do, so this may be confusing or this might seem ambiguous.
Inspirational atmosphere.
Inspirational, good. Very good. Especially for poets and artists. Good. Charming, yes. So we discussed setting and atmosphere. We can also, okay, we'll go back to the general setting and we'll go back to, in a minute, we'll go back to the idea of the historical setting, the fact that the text is set in Victorian times, and we see how we can detect this non-physical aspect of the setting. Let's explore now the last, let's say, 5 or 6 lines. The reference to the dwelling of Mrs. Brown, the widow of the late curate of Combehurst. How is Mrs. Brown depicted? There she lived with her faithful old servant and her only children, a boy and girl. They were as secluded in their green hollow as the households in the German forest tales. Once a week they emerged and crossed the common, catching on its summit the first sounds of the sweet-toned bells, calling them to church. There is an implicit contrast here between the setting, its charm, its sublimity, and the way these people live. The inhabitants of this setting live. They were as secluded. This comparison, this simile is very important here. What does secluded mean?
Hidden.
Hidden?
Yes.
Yes. Isolated. Good. Isolated. Hidden from sight. Yes. Isolated. To live in seclusion, to be isolated from the rest of the world. Yes. To live in isolation. Yes, in the middle of nowhere. They're in the middle of somewhere, but in reality, yes, they're in the middle of nowhere, yes. Private is too positive. Yes, lonely, yes. Isolated, lonely, loneliness. Isolation. As if they were jailed, yes. But it's a self-inflicted punishment. They're punishing themselves. They're inflicting this punishment on themselves. It's a choice. Loneliness. Solitude. We talk about solitude when it's a choice. Okay. They live in a separate universe. Separated, the P is followed by an A. Okay, separated, abrar, separated, PA. Aloof, distant from the rest of the world. Aloof or distant, they have the same, yes, confined, yes. This is permanent confinement, permanent lockdown. This is permanent lockdown. So what does this reveal about them? Or what is the message here? What is the author's message from creating this contrast? What does this reveal about their lifestyle, their mindset? Why do they emerge? The word emerge here, notice that she doesn't say leave this place or go out or emerged, as if they were dead. They emerged from their grave. Once a week they emerged. and crossed the common catch on his summit, the first sounds of the sweet-toned bells, calling them to church.
It's a place of rebornness.
Is it the place of rebirth? I think that the description of this lady and her children is very...
No. I mean rebirth of a new personality, of a new you.
Is this does this apply to these characters?
I mean, in the description of the place, that's what I mean. When they describe the place.
Is this how you relate the place to the characters? Despite, yes, there is contrast. Despite the charm and scenery, these people fail to perceive, they fail to appreciate this setting, its charm, its beauty. Why is that? What do we discover about this lady? She is a widow, so probably she feels lonely or prefers to isolate herself because of that difficult experience. So this reveals the extent to which she is probably affected by the death of her husband. Yes. Yeah, she probably a nun. We're not told that she is a nun, but we might, yeah, it might be an implicit reference to her religious status because she is the widow of the late curate, but she's not a nun because nuns are not allowed to marry. Okay, but she has a strong religious background. Yes. Curate means a priest or a religious person. So, but we can't say a nun, be careful, huh? Because they don't match. But she has a strong religious background, yes. We can understand this also from the fact that she lived near the church, inside the church, the field. So they were as secluded in their green hollow as households in the German forest days. It's a funny picture. I think that the last two sentences create a very funny picture. I think that the author is making fun of them. What is the message here?
The narrator describes the atmosphere with
Yes, Rahma. Good. The sweet-toned bells calling them to church. So the only occasion on which they emerged from their grave, if you want.
When they hear the bells.
When they hear the sweet-toned bells. But do they emerge to hear the bells, to listen to the bells? Their sweet
to pray.
tones.
To pray.
Yes, to pray. What does this reveal? Only to pray, to go to church. They live in the church, and the only time they go out is to go to visit the church.
We talk about nuns.
Not to enjoy nature, not to enjoy, yes, what's a life? Can you express it differently? Say it, name it. What kind of life is this? It's this secluded...
Religious purpose?
Mishkat, this reveals the importance
Boring.
of religion people. But is this normal? All of us are social individuals. We live in a society. It's an absurd life. Abnormal, boring life, yes. Very good, Mishkat. So here, they pray more than... True, that's true. So what does this reveal about this society? See how these people, these individuals, these characters reveal a lot about their society, about Victorian society, a very important characteristic of Victorian society. What do you call a person who is, nowadays we call these people extremists, we call this religious fundamentalism nowadays. This is related to terrorism. See how words change. See how terminology changes with time. We can't call them terrorists, but
no, it's in the eyes.
Yes, there is piety, good, but pious is good. There is piety. Yes, pious, they are pious. Good. But it's the extreme here. It's excessive. It's excessive. One important characteristic of the Victorian era is that it is characterized, is that it is marked by excess
Excessive.
in morality, excess in religious belief. This is why it was called a very rigid. Victorians are very rigid people. They have very rigid morals. They are conservative. But when you're conservative and rigid, you are narrow-minded also. Yes, it's 9:40, yes. If you have another session, you can leave, by the way. Yes, even their art is rigid, stubborn, narrow-minded. So I think that these characters are representatives of their society, of Victorian society. And the contrast here, and let me finish with this for those who have another session. The contrast between the setting, its charming beauty, its sublimity, and the life, the secluded life, the poor life. That poor here is very like the Puritans, yes, but Puritans, this is the American context, this is another context. The contrast here between the setting, its beauty, the comfort it brings to the mind, its sublimity, and the way of life, this poor life. Poor is metaphorical here, okay? The poor life that these people are living reveals the rigidity of this miserable life, yes, the rigidity of their morals, the rigidity of their lifestyles, the rigidity of their lifestyle, and the wealth of meaning, of emotions, the wealth, listen to me, I'm finishing, the wealth of meaning, the wealth of emotions that they are depriving themselves of. The wealth is metaphorical again, of emotions, feelings that they are depriving themselves of. So this could be the author's message. See how the context, the social context, the historical context, yes, in favor of the divine, yes. The divine is worth it. It doesn't mean that, but the divine can be revealed elsewhere, differently. Even nature is divine. True. For the sake of the divine. Yes, but the divine can be found everywhere. And this is probably the author's message. So they are doomed to live a frustrated life. Yes, true.